Star Spangled Sunday.
Please help me welcome the 44th Governor of Arkansas and the host of the most popular weekend television program, Mike Huckabee.
Thank you. There is no explanation for America other than God's hand of providence. There is no other explanation. I don't know if you've ever thought about the origins of this country, but I want you to remember that it was a bunch of farmers and merchants and preachers who took the muskets off their mantles. Muskets that were better suited for hunting rabbits and killing squirrels and taking on the best, most well-equipped, well-trained, and even well-dressed army in the known world, the British Army. Imagine the audacity of these American upstarts who wanted to create not just a little piece of real estate or get a tax cut. They wanted to start a whole other country. They wanted to break loose and be free. And they knew full well that if their experiment in government should fail, that they would pay not only with their blood, but with the blood of their own children. With all that at risk, they were willing to put it all on the line because they believed that to live free was to live. Amen. And to not live free, one might as well die. Amen. Because they had already experienced the death of one's spirit. It was that kind of courage that led them to defy common sense and reason and rational thinking and say, nothing will keep us from declaring ourselves free. And I tell you that if one looks at the realities of military strategy, there is no explanation for what happened other than, as Forrest Gump so eloquently said, God showed up. And yes, he did. Now, I want to ask you a question tonight because I see a lot of Americans who are discouraged and dispirited. I'm going to ask you something. What's wrong with you? I say it this way. Did God not save you out of your own sins? Did God not rescue some of you from a life that you just soon never, ever reflect back upon? Would you say that it was anything less than the miracle of heaven itself that gave you everlasting life? How many of you here tonight could testify of God showing up in a hospital room where your husband had been given up for dead, but he's sitting with you tonight? How many of you could say of the moment at which you stood over your child's crib and you prayed, and God heard that prayer, and God blessed that prayer? You have seen God work in your own life. You need not simply turn to the pages of history to understand the mighty hand of God. I ask you this: if you have seen God work in your own heart, if you have seen God work in your family, if you have read about the extraordinary ways in which a holy God has intervened on behalf of this nation, then why are we so dispirited? Is it time for us to stop complaining about what is and start believing what will be if God's people on their faces in humility and brokenness will once again ask for His hand of providence to envelop this great land of ours? My dear friend, the mighty hand of God has been throughout this country's history the singular difference in why we have survived. Quite frankly, there's no other explanation. No country should have survived the Civil War that tore brother against brother, father against mother, cousin against cousin. No country should have survived the horrible economic collapse that happened in the Great Depression. No country should have survived the very frontal assault on our freedom that we saw in World War II. Most countries could not survive the successive assassinations of leaders like John F. Kennedy, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Robert Kennedy, in less than a decade. Most countries could not survive if their cities were being torched by the people who lived in their own neighborhoods, and when the college campuses became battlegrounds rather than places of learning. Most countries couldn't survive when a president had lost his integrity and had to resign in humiliation. But this country continues to survive. And I tell you why. It's not because we are wonderful people. It's not because we have a great Constitution, although I believe we have a great Constitution. We ought to share it with the rest of the world that are looking for a way to govern. Besides, it doesn't seem like we're using it all that much these days anyway. But the reason we have survived is but for one thing. There have always been a remnant of God's people who faithfully on their faces before a holy God have entreated upon Him to bring His hand of providence upon us. And tonight, we're still here. I used to watch the Arkansas Razorback basketball games late at night when they were replayed because they couldn't be played live in the days when there were only a few games that could be aired live. They would say that if you don't want to know the score, turn the sound off your television, and then you can watch the game as if it is live. I thought that was the nuttiest thing I'd ever heard of. I turned the volume up. I wanted to know who won, because if I found out the Razorbacks had in fact won, I'd pop popcorn, I'd sit in my recliner, and I'd watch the game, and I was totally confident that no matter what the score was at halftime or late in the second half, and if we were down by 15 points with 2 minutes to play, I'd say, y'all don't worry, we're going to come back in this thing here. You see, I already knew the outcome. I wasn't worried about how it was going to end because it had already been played out. I was just watching it to see it as it had been played. I want to remind you of something. In case you have not read the end of the book, I want to encourage you to slip over there and do it. Because I got good news for all of the dispirited, disquieted Christians in America who somehow are afraid that the sons of Ishmael, who are challenging us now in the Middle East, will overwhelm the sons of Isaac. Let me assure you, I have read the end of the book. My dear friend, we win, and our flag still stands. Our flag is still there.
We've got this website, 123vote.com, and this is what comes up on the screen. We need to pray that God would raise up godly men and women, and then we need to pray for discernment and wisdom to vote for the right people. Regardless of party, regardless of all of those things, we need to vote for godly men and women.